Around 2:30 p.m. local time in the Caribbean Sea, a pair of Venezuelan F-16 Fighting Falcons screamed across the sky, flying just a few hundred feet above the waves. These weren't aimed at chasing smugglers or practicing on a training range. Their actual target was the USS Jason Dunham, a U.S. Navy Arleigh Burke-class destroyer packed with sensors and missiles. The radar blips showed them coming in fast, rapidly closing the distance. On the bridge of the American warship, everyone knew exactly what was happening. This wasn't some accidental flyby. It was a calculated act of provocation. A high-stakes game of chicken involving supersonic jets and extremely expensive military equipment. The Pentagon later described it as a reckless move. CBS News reported that it was the second time in 2 days that Venezuelan jets had pulled the same stunt. But for the sailors on watch aboard the destroyer, the official labels didn't really matter. All they knew was that these two Cold War-era fighter jets were headed straight for them, their afterburners blazing like torches against the Caribbean sky. Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro was trying to project an image of strength, to remind Washington that Caracas wouldn't be intimidated, especially after a U.S. strike had sunk a speedboat suspected of being run by a drug cartel just a few days prior. However, by choosing this particular stunt, his pilots were about to learn a valuable lesson. Intimidation can be a double-edged sword. They thought they were sending a clear message, but they had no idea they were handing the U.S. Navy a truly invaluable gift. The F-16s came in hot, banking so low that their shock waves visibly rippled across the water's surface. On the bridge of the Jason Dunham, every sailor knew the procedure. Stay calm, hold your course, and let the ship's sophisticated defenses do the talking. The initial warning came over the radio. A calm American voice transmitted on open frequencies saying, "Unidentified aircraft, you are approaching a United States warship operating in international waters. Maintain a safe distance." The Venezuelan pilots offered no response. Instead, one of them engaged his afterburner, roaring past the bow in a burst of orange flame. Inside the Combat Information Center, the real action was already taking place. The ship's AN Spy-1 radar, the central component of the Aegis combat system, had locked onto the incoming jets long before the crew even visually acquired them. Data flowed across the consoles: altitude, speed, bearing. Weapons officers armed the ship's layered defense systems. SM-2 surface-to-air missiles in the vertical launch cells. RIM-162 evolved Sea Sparrow missiles for close-in interception, and as a last resort, the Phalanx CIWS Gatling gun. If the Venezuelan fighters made a single wrong move, the destroyer could easily take them out in seconds. But firing wasn't the objective. The captain remained calm, arms crossed, watching the tactical display. His orders were clear: do not escalate unless directly threatened. The Jason Dunham was in international waters and had every right to be there. The actual danger wasn't the aircraft themselves, but the possibility of a miscalculation that could quickly escalate into an international incident. From the deck, sailors watched as the second F-16 screamed overhead, flying so low that its shadow momentarily passed over the destroyer's missile hatches. To someone without specialized training, it might have looked like Venezuela had won the game of intimidation. But the reality was quite the opposite. Every radio transmission the pilots made back to Caracas, every sweep of their radar, every flicker of their targeting systems was being meticulously recorded by the Jason Dunham's electronic warfare suite. The closer they came, the more they revealed about their capabilities. The Venezuelans thought they were showing off, but they didn't realize they had unknowingly stepped into a sophisticated American data trap. The USS Jason Dunham wasn't just any ship. It's an Arleigh Burke-class guided missile destroyer, essentially a floating fortress. Its radar dome, the AN Spy-1, can track hundreds of targets simultaneously, from low-flying, sea-skimming missiles to high-altitude jets. For the crew, a couple of F-16s buzzing the deck hardly registered as a significant threat compared to what the ship was actually designed to counter. So the question is, why was the Navy even present in Venezuelan waters in the first place? The answer dates back just a few days. On September 2nd, American aircraft had destroyed a speedboat in the Caribbean, claiming it belonged to Venezuela's powerful Tren de Aragua cartel. 11 people were killed in that strike, an operation that the White House hailed as a success in the war on drugs. In Caracas, the incident was viewed very differently. President Nicolas Maduro condemned the attack as a violation of sovereignty, promising retaliation. Just days later, his F-16s were screaming across the Caribbean sky. Ironically, these very jets were once supplied to Venezuela by the United States. Back in the 1980s, Venezuela purchased dozens of F-16As, which were cutting-edge technology at the time. 4 decades later, the fleet is showing its age. Spare parts are scarce, the avionics are outdated, and maintenance is a constant challenge. Still in Maduro's hands, they have become symbols of defiance, fast, loud, and dramatic, even if no longer truly modern. The contrast couldn't have been more stark. On one side, Cold War relics struggling to appear menacing. On the other, a destroyer connected to one of the most advanced naval networks in the world, supported by satellites, drones, and a full carrier strike group nearby. From an external perspective, the F-16s might have appeared to have the upper hand, but in reality, the opposite was true. The closer they flew, the more they exposed. The Venezuelan F-16s were giving away everything. Their fire control radars painted the Jason Dunham in an attempt to appear threatening. Instead, they handed over precise waveforms that Navy analysts could catalog and file. Their radios were buzzing with chatter back to coastal bases. The ship's ANSLQ-32 electronic warfare system absorbed it all, logging which frequencies were used, how secure the communications were, and even the precise moment the pilots keyed their microphones. And then there was the infrared data. By diving low and using their afterburners, the fighters left massive thermal trails in the humid Caribbean air. The destroyer's IR sensors captured it all. For the Navy, it was like photographing fingerprints at a crime scene. Invaluable, undeniable evidence of how Venezuela's jets actually perform under pressure. The irony is harsh. Caracas wanted to intimidate and project strength, but intimidation at close range is always noisy. In the electronic battle space, noise can be deadly. Every flare, every radar ping, every afterburner burst wasn't scaring the U.S., it was feeding its databases. To Venezuelan command back on land, the footage might have looked like a victory, jets screaming over a U.S. warship, appearing defiant and bold. But the analysts watching from Norfolk or Pearl Harbor saw something entirely different. They saw vulnerabilities, cataloged weaknesses, and completed a profile of Venezuela's aging air fleet, all delivered on a silver platter. By the time the F-16s finally banked away, the Jason Dunham's crew hadn't even flinched. They didn't need to. Venezuela had already made its biggest mistake, mistaking noise for power. And while those pilots thought they had rattled America's cage, they had actually opened the door to something far more dangerous: escalation. The flyovers might have seemed like mere theatrics, but Washington wasn't amused. Within hours, the Pentagon labeled the incident as reckless and provocative. And President Donald Trump made the message perfectly clear: any Venezuelan aircraft that endangers our ships will be shot down. That wasn't just empty rhetoric. Just days later, 10 F-35 Lightning II stealth fighters arrived in Puerto Rico, only a 2-hour flight from Venezuelan airspace. These weren't aging jets from the 1980s. These were America's crown jewels, fifth-generation fighters designed to slip past radars and dismantle enemy defenses before the first warning siren even sounds. Their deployment sent a clear signal. If Caracas wanted to gamble in the skies, the stakes had just been raised significantly. Meanwhile, the Jason Dunham wasn't alone. Behind her stood the full weight of an entire U.S. Navy task force. Destroyers, cruisers, supply ships, and even amphibious assault vessels carrying Marines were patrolling the Caribbean. Overhead, P-8 Poseidon patrol aircraft scanned the waters, while drones watched from even higher altitudes. A single destroyer might appear isolated on the horizon, but in reality it was connected to a layered defense system stretching across the entire region. For Venezuela, this created a serious imbalance. Their F-16s could buzz and perhaps even harass, but they couldn't change the fundamental facts. Their air force lacked modern missiles, lacked stealth capabilities, and lacked the logistical support to sustain a prolonged conflict. Even if they wanted to, matching American firepower was simply impossible. Yet, provocation has a dangerous logic of its own. One wrong move, a missile lock, a misinterpreted radio call, And the situation could have quickly gone from noisy flybys to a full-blown shooting war in a matter of seconds. The U.S. destroyer's crew knew it, and the Venezuelan pilots probably felt it in their cockpits as well. A game of chicken is only enjoyable until someone refuses to swerve. Maduro may have hoped that the flyovers would boost national pride and send a warning to Washington. Instead, they triggered the exact opposite: a surge in U.S. military presence in the Caribbean and a clear warning that the next close pass might end in flames. Because when you're up against the U.S. Navy, there's one unbreakable rule: never mistake restraint for weakness. From the outside, Venezuela's flyovers looked like defiance, jets roaring past a U.S. destroyer, daring America to react. But beneath the surface, it was a textbook example of overconfidence leading to self-sabotage. Strategically, the stunt handed Washington everything it wanted. The Navy collected radar signatures, communications protocols, and thermal data from Venezuela's most capable fighters, all without firing a single shot. In military terms, that's a jackpot. Intelligence like this isn't always obvious, but in a future crisis, it can make the difference between surprise and dominance. This wasn't the first time an adversary had made the same mistake. Just months earlier in the South China Sea, a Chinese Z-10 attack helicopter tried to intimidate a U.S. MH-60R. Instead, it revealed electronic signatures that American analysts cataloged for future conflicts. In the Red Sea, Houthi fighters launched a missile at a Navy Seahawk, expecting a propaganda victory. Instead, they exposed their tactics, were tracked, and lost their launch site in seconds. Different actors, same story. Intimidation stunts that backfired, turning into valuable gifts for U.S. intelligence. For Caracas, the lesson is clear. Flying low and fast might impress crowds back home, but against an Aegis-equipped destroyer, it's just background noise. Even worse, it undermines Venezuela's strategic position. Instead of projecting strength, it highlights weakness: aging aircraft against a fleet designed for global warfare. Every pass over a U.S. warship becomes another data point in America's growing library of adversary tactics. And for Washington, the takeaway is equally clear. Stay calm, hold your fire, and let the other side make the mistakes. Escalation isn't always about pulling the trigger. Sometimes the smartest move is to wait, listen, and collect everything your opponent is foolish enough to broadcast. In modern warfare, silence often wins battles, while arrogance inevitably loses them. By the time the Venezuelan F-16s turned for home, the Jason Dunham hadn't changed course, hadn't fired a missile, and hadn't flinched. To the sailors on board, it was just another entry in the ship's log. But to analysts watching the data streams, it was a treasure trove. Venezuela had tried to rattle the cage, but ended up rattling itself. The broader lesson is simple: the side that stays calm usually prevails. Flybys, flares, and chest thumping don't alter the balance of power. What truly matters is discipline, training, and the ability to transform noise into actionable knowledge. On that front, the U.S. Navy walked away with a clear advantage, without even breaking a sweat. But here's the real question to consider. If you were standing on the bridge of that destroyer, watching two supersonic fighters scream low across your bow, what would you have done? Would you have fired a warning shot or held steady and trusted your ship's defenses? Drop your answer in the comments below. I'm eager to see how you would have handled the situation. And if you found this analysis engaging, please remember to like, subscribe, and share it with anyone who enjoys maritime stories. As always, if you'd like to further support the channel directly, consider joining the fleet. You'll receive loyalty badges, priority responses, and you'll help us bring more true maritime stories to light. Just click join on our channel page and come aboard. In this particular game of chicken, Venezuela assumed it was holding the stronger hand. The U.S. Navy clearly demonstrated otherwise. I'll catch you in the next video.